I think this is a big factor that a lot of people just kind of get too caught up in the numbers of, yeah, I just dealt 50 damage. So kind of our first point that we'll talk about is I think this is a big factor that a lot of people just kind of get too caught up in the numbers of, yeah, I just dealt 50 damage, but don't go into the aspect of how that affects the person you're attacking or anything.
Right. And I think that kind of comes down to how you do it at your table.
Yeah.
I've seen it where people think that the hit points is basically how many times your character is able to dodge or avoid taking real damage. So really just kind of surface level damage, like puncturing your armor or maybe breaking some chains on your chainmail, things like that, but not mortally
Mortally
wounding you.
wounding, yeah.
And that when you actually take your wound points, that's when you've been severely wounded. And that's kind of how I really do it. I think that once the player has been knocked unconscious from a weapon that's a piercing or stabbing weapon, then obviously they've taken some sort of a mortal wound and they are bleeding out now on the ground. Other people like to. I've seen it where they kind of have like a traffic light. They have like a green, yellow, red, and they know that when their character gets to a certain point of their HP, that they put on this ring on their character, so that they know how to start describing the character a little bit more fatigued or taking damage or showing blood, things like that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and that way of doing it, the way of them, it's like, oh well, they're at full health and whatever, and then like if they take some damage, like oh it damages their armor, or it like it's like a surface level wound or whatever. Like I feel like that's like a way more interesting way of describing damage than just saying you bury your axe in this character's shoulder 7 times, and that's every time they take damage.
Now,
like,
if there is a situation like that, if that's
yeah.
the case, then yeah, go for it.
But
if you have some big like flesh golem that you just every time you hit this thing, it just keeps coming at you, then yeah, you could sit there and say, okay, this dude broke off his sword inside the golem and it's still coming at him.
Yeah.
But most
absolutely.
people get hit with a big piece of steel. I don't think they're going to keep coming after you, but it's D&D.
It keeps that
or whatever.
Yeah, it depends on how you want to play. Like a lot of us, we like that whole RP, so we like a little bit of realism into it. And one of like the cool things we've started doing at our table is the whole, how do you want to do this? So if you're the overlord, your player gets a crazy hit off, deals good damage. You get the damage results. You're looking at the wounds of that creature. It's at 0 instead of saying, yeah, you killed it. Moving on. Give them that. How do you want to do this? Especially when it is a big boss villain. This is what everybody's been fighting. They've been pounding away. You have like 2 people who are close to death or already unconscious. And now you hit that strike. To hear that, how do you want to do this is almost like getting a nat 20 at the table.
Yeah, and I think that's become more popular, obviously, because of Matt Mercer and Critical Role.
Yes,
with saying, how do you want to do this? Like he kind of has the catchphrase of it down. But I remember playing games, in Frank's loft where, somebody was fighting some big monster, and instead of him going with the description, he would say, you tell me what happens. You did this. And it's letting the player, it's engaging with the player to let them kind of control a little bit of the battle.
Yes.
Yeah. That's another point that we kind of wanted to make. And we were talking about before where you have like a mass battle where if you have a lot of underlings or a lot of combatants where you can kind of let your player or your player characters maybe cut through several of them.
Yeah, get without a little zealous with their description, you know what I mean?
Right, and like you don't have to sit there and be like, okay, I have to run through all the stats and run through all the initiatives of all the little squishy goblins that are running out ahead of my orc horde. No. You don't really need to do that. You can just let your players kind of go through them. If they hit them, boom, they take them out. like so it's more of like an action sequence, and you can kind of describe it in a way that your players get the idea that their characters are above the normal soldier, the normal foot soldier, that they may be a little bit more heroic.